Ava Addams was 34 years old, a fact that often surprised people who met her for the first time. She possessed a timeless, womanly quality that seemed to exist outside the frantic TikTok of youth-obsessed Los Angeles. She lived not in some sterile, modern glassbox, but in a beautifully renovated Spanish-style bungalow in the Studio City Hills, filled with dark wood, rich textiles, and the scent of jasmine that drifted in from her private patio. Her annual income was a subject of industry speculation, but a conservative estimate placed it well over $750,000 a year, a figure built from 2 decades of shrewd work, brand building, and residual checks that arrived with the comforting regularity of the tides. She was, by all measurable standards, a success. A queen in her kingdom. But kingdoms are never built on gold alone. They are forged in the fires of necessity, heartbreak, and a desperate, clawing will to survive. 2 decades earlier, she was simply Ava, a wide-eyed 18-year-old from the sun-baked, sprawling suburbs of Houston, Texas. She wasn't running to something in Los Angeles so much as she was running from a dead-end future, from a family that loved her but couldn't understand her, from the crushing weight of a small-town girl's ordinary destiny. Her dreams were cliched, but they were hers. To be an actress, a model, a face on a magazine. She arrived with a portfolio of cheesy glamour shots and $500 cash, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The city, however, was a brutal teacher. The modeling gigs were for fly-by-night companies selling cheap jewelry on late-night TV, where she was paid in leftover product. The acting roles were non-speaking parts in student films that never saw the light of day. She shared a 2-bedroom apartment in North Hollywood with 3 other girls, all with the same hungry look in their eyes. They lived on ramen noodles and hope, their lives a cycle of cattle call auditions and soul-crushing rejections. Ava, with her curvaceous figure and mature look, was constantly told she was too voluptuous for mainstream fashion. Not the girl next door enough for commercials. She was a square peg in a city of very specific, very narrow round holes. To pay the rent, she waitressed at a tacky pirate-themed restaurant in Hollywood, wearing a ridiculously short skirt and a corset that left bruises on her ribs. It was there she met Marco, a slick, handsome aspiring film producer in his late 20s. He drove a convertible, wore a gold watch, and spoke in a honeyed baritone about connections and potential. To Ava, he was a lifeline. He wined her, dined her, and made her feel seen. He told her she was a diamond in the rough, that the mainstream industry was blind to her unique beauty. He promised to make her a star. What he made her was his dependent. Slowly, insidiously, he isolated her from her roommates, criticizing them as amateurish and bad influences. He convinced her to quit her waitressing job, promising to take care of her, while he put together a real production for her. She moved into his sterile, minimalist apartment in West Hollywood. The first time he hit her was after she mentioned an old male friend from Texas had called. It was a mistake, he said, fueled by his passionate love for her and his fear of losing her. She believed him. The control tightened. He monitored her phone calls, her spending, her time. The diamond in the rough was now his prisoner, kept in a gilded cage. The turning point came on a sweltering August night. Marco had promised her a lead role in an indie drama he was producing. The audition was a dinner at a lavish hotel with a powerful, lecherous older director. Marco spent the evening pressuring her, his hand a vice on her knee under the table, to be nice to the director, to show him how committed you are to the craft. The unspoken demand hung in the air, suffocating her. In the bathroom, staring at her reflection, a girl painted and primped for her own auction, something inside her snapped. The fear that had been her constant companion was suddenly eclipsed by a white-hot fury. This wasn't a path to stardom, it was a road to ruin. She walked out of the restaurant and kept walking, leaving her purse with her ID and her last $20 at the table. She walked for miles, the heels of her shoes breaking on the cracked pavement, until she found herself in the neon-soaked heart of Hollywood Boulevard, surrounded by tourists and ghosts of dreams past. She was 19 years old, homeless, penniless, and utterly free. She slept on the couch of a girl she barely knew from her old waitressing job. The next day, humbled and desperate, she went to a temp agency and was placed at a small, nondescript office in the San Fernando Valley that handled accounting for various entertainment companies. It was there, filing invoices, that she first saw the paperwork. The numbers were staggering. A performer for a single day's work could earn what she used to make in 3 months at the pirate restaurant. The company names were ones she vaguely recognized from the darker corners of the internet. This was the adult film industry. The idea didn't come to her as a shocking revelation, but as a cold, hard calculation. Her body had already been a commodity. For Marco, for the lecherous director, for the pirate restaurant. The only difference was the price tag and who held the power. Here, the price tag was explicit, the contracts were clear, and the check would be made out to her. It was the most honest form of exploitation she had ever encountered. She wasn't being promised fame and stardom. She was being offered a transaction. And right now, she needed the capital. She used the office computer after hours to research. She learned which studios had good reputations, which directors were professional. She chose a name, Ava Addams, a combination of simplicity and old Hollywood gravitas. She scraped together $50 for a set of professional photos from a struggling photographer she found on Craigslist. She didn't do glamour shots. She wore a simple tank top and jeans, her gaze direct, challenging, and utterly devoid of the coquettishness she saw in other portfolios. She was not selling fantasy. She was selling resilience. She sent the photos to a mid-sized, reputable studio known for its high production values. The response was immediate. The producer, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s named Brenda, was intrigued. "You don't look like a girl who's trying to be sexy," Brenda said over the phone, her voice a gravelly smoker's rasp. "You look like a woman who is sexy. It's a different thing. Come in tomorrow." The shoot was for a solo scene. The set was a plush, generic living room. The crew was small, efficient, and silent. As the makeup artist powdered her face, Ava felt a profound calm settle over her. This was a job. A difficult, strange, and deeply personal job, but a job nonetheless. There were no false promises, no lies about her potential. There was only a task to be completed for a set fee. When the hot lights clicked on, she didn't think of Marco, or her parents in Texas, or the dreams she had buried. She thought of the money. She thought of the first month's rent on an apartment that would be hers alone. She thought of the freedom it would buy. She performed the required actions with a focused, almost clinical precision. It wasn't passion the camera captured. It was a deep, simmering intensity. A will of iron. Afterward, Brenda handed her an envelope of cash. $1,500. "You're a natural," Brenda said, not smiling. "You've got a presence. Most girls are nervous, giggly. You're quiet. It's powerful. We have a boy-girl scene next week. It pays $4,000. Ava took the envelope. The weight of it in her hand was more than just paper and currency. It was the weight of her future. She didn't feel shame. She didn't feel turned on. She felt solvent. For the first time since she'd stepped off the bus from Houston, she was in control of her own destiny, no matter how controversial the path. She rented a small, clean studio apartment in Van Nuys, paying the first and last month's rent in cash. She bought a new lock for the door. That night, alone in her own space, the silence was not oppressive but peaceful. She was Ava Addams now. The girl from Texas was gone, her naivety stripped away, leaving behind a core of hardened ambition. She had looked into the abyss of the city's underbelly, and had decided not to fall in, but to climb out, using whatever handholds she could find, no matter how dark or slippery they seemed. The first part of her journey was over. She had survived. Now, the real work of building an empire was about to begin. The first year as Ava Addams was a brutal, exhilarating education. The boy-girl scene was a psychological mountain to climb. The intimacy was performative, a series of choreographed movements under the director's calm instructions. Her co-star, a seasoned professional named Jack, was polite and detached, treating her with a respectful distance that she appreciated. It was a job, and they were co-workers completing a complex task. Ava approached it with the same focus she had everything else, as a means to an end. The $4,000 bought her a reliable used car and the ability to breathe without the constant gnawing of financial anxiety. She quickly became known as the professional. She was always on time, knew her lines, Even for these types of films, there was often a loose script, and never caused drama on set. Directors loved her because she took direction well, and delivered a consistent product. Producers loved her because she was bankable. Her mature and voluptuous look, once a liability in mainstream Hollywood, was her greatest asset here. She carved out a niche for herself as the attainable fantasy, the sophisticated woman next door, the confident boss. She wasn't playing a character. She was monetizing the very qualities that had once held her back. The money flowed in, and Ava, scarred by her past poverty and manipulation, was shrewd with it. She hired a good accountant. She invested in real estate, buying her Studio City bungalow at a relative low point in the market. She never lived extravagantly. Her luxury was her security. She sent money home to Texas, telling her family a carefully constructed story about a successful career in independent film production. The lies were a necessary poison, a dull ache she learned to live with. By her mid-20s, Ava was a top-tier performer, but a quiet dissatisfaction began to creep in. She had achieved financial independence, but she was still essentially an employee, a body for hire. The industry, for all its upfront honesty, had its own hierarchies and power dynamics. She saw young girls come and go, chewed up and spat out, their money squandered, their psyches damaged. She remembered being that girl with Marco, and a protective, almost maternal instinct stirred within her. This was the genesis of her second act. She began to produce. Using her industry clout and a significant portion of her savings, she founded Aura Productions. Her vision was simple: create content with higher production values, stronger narratives, and, most importantly, unparalleled care for the performers. She offered higher rates, better working conditions, and a strict, zero-tolerance policy for on-set pressure or misconduct. She became the protector she had never had. It was a risky venture, and the old guard scoffed. But Ava's reputation for integrity attracted the best talent in the industry, performers who were tired of being treated like disposable props. Aura Productions' first few releases were critical and commercial successes, proving that there was an audience for adult entertainment that didn't just feel transactional, but actually artistic and respectful. Ava Addams, the performer, was now Ava Addams, the mogul. She had built her own table, and now she got to decide who sat at it. This ascent to power, however, did not go unnoticed or unpunished. A rival producer, a sleazy, old-school mogul named Vince Carbone, whose exploitative practices were the antithesis of everything Aura stood for, saw her as a threat. He launched a smear campaign, planting stories in tabloid blogs about her, digging into her past. He found Marco. Marco, now a failed, bitter man in his 40s, was all too happy to be paid for his story. He gave a lurid interview, painting Ava as a manipulative gold digger who had used him and then abandoned him for the porn industry. He revealed her real name, her hometown. The story exploded. The fallout was immediate and vicious. Tabloid reporters camped outside her bungalow. Hate mail and death threats flooded her business P.O. box. But the worst was yet to come. Her mother called, her voice broken with tears and confusion after a reporter had shown up on her doorstep in Houston. "Ava, is this true? All of it? The films? And this man, he said such terrible things." Explaining her career to her mother was the single most difficult conversation of her life. She didn't try to justify it. She simply told her the truth about her desperation, about Marco, about her choice being one of survival, and then, later, of empowerment. There was a long, painful silence on the line. "I need time, baby," her mother whispered before hanging up. For a week, Ava was paralyzed. The shame she had thought she was immune to came crashing down on her. The fortress of success she had built felt like a house of cards. Vince Carbone had not just attacked her business, he had attacked her very identity, forcing the two halves of her life, Ava from Texas and Ava Addams the star, into a violent public collision that was her own daughter, 5-year-old Chloe, who pulled her out of the darkness. Chloe was the result of a brief, passionate relationship with a photographer a few years prior. He was not in the picture, and Ava was a fiercely devoted, single mother. Her entire world, her reason for building her empire, was to give Chloe a life of safety and opportunity that she had never known. "Mommy, why are you sad?" Chloe asked one morning, climbing into her bed. Looking into her daughter's innocent, worried eyes, Ava's fear crystallized into a steely resolve. She would not be shamed into hiding. She would not let men like Marco and Vince Carbone define her narrative. Her story was not one of disgrace, but of triumph. She had to own it, completely and publicly, for herself and for her daughter. She decided to go on the offensive. She granted an exclusive interview to a respected, mainstream journalist known for thoughtful long-form profiles. She didn't shy away from anything. She spoke about Texas, about Marco, about the desperate choice that led her to the industry. She spoke about the difference between exploitation and agency. She talked about the economics, the business acumen it required, and her mission with Aura Productions to create a more ethical space. Most importantly, she spoke about being a mother, about the constant balancing act, and about her desire to teach her daughter that a woman's body and her sexuality are not things to be ashamed of, but parts of a whole, complex human being who can be both a nurturing parent and a powerful CEO. The article was a sensation. It didn't just rehabilitate her image, it transformed it. She was no longer just a porn star. She was a survivor, an entrepreneur, a feminist icon, a label she accepted with some irony, and a devoted mother. The public perception shifted dramatically. Offers poured in, for book deals, for speaking engagements, for consulting work in mainstream tech about creator economies. Vince Carbone's smear campaign backfired spectacularly, and his studio soon folded under a wave of bad press and boycotts. Ava Addams had not only survived the attack, she had emerged stronger, more powerful, and more legitimate than ever. Now, at 34, sitting on the patio of her beautiful bungalow, watching Chloe play in the garden, Ava reflects on her journey. The money is nice, the house is beautiful, but they are not the point. The point is the unshakable peace that comes from self-ownership. She had been a victim, a survivor, a worker, a boss, a pioneer, and a mother. She had taken the parts of herself that the world had told her were liabilities, her body, her past, her trauma, and had welded them into a weapon of immense power. The story of Ava Addams was not a fall from grace. It was a long, hard climb to a summit that she herself had built, and the view from the top was entirely her own.